We have Mike Dobran, who has many experiences as a Cheyney alumni, played at Cheyney, coached at Cheyney, was on a Hall of Fame committee, just years and years of service, so to speak. Maybe you could just kind of start with your first experiences at Cheyney.
Well, my first experience with Chaney football is from a relative of yours, Red Saunders, your uncle. And he was a coach at St. Brendan's with Bob Gerst and Ron Posey. And during the season, they would call up the high schools, and they would take us to a bunch of Cheyney games, and they would take us to several Ursuline games. And we would go to the games and enjoyed them, and we sort of got into it. That was my first contact with Cheyney. And I always joked around that one of the years Joe Lutzy was playing, and he threw a jump pass to Bob Duda and beat Wilson by 2 points, and I said, I'm going to Cheyney. So I joke around with him about that.
So you went to St. Brendan's, and what years? What was that time frame there from St. Brendan's to enrolling in Cheyney?
My senior season at Cheyney was 67, 66, 65. 64, I was at West Junior High, and that was the year that Cheyney played Ursuline in the preview game at the beginning of the season and beat them 20-0 and a half. Then played them the last game of the season and lost 6-0 and it was a controversial play, simultaneous catch. It looked like Del Signore intercepted the ball on like the 2-yard line and whatever. They ended up beating Cheyney. It appeared they were badly outplayed with the stats and everything, but Cheyney lost the game. That was the only game they lost that season. But the place was packed, and all us kids from West, everybody wanted to go, and most of the kids from St. Brendan's the year before, they wanted to go to Cheyney instead of Ursuline. I think it was a big change.
Yeah. So West Middle School, West Junior High, that would have, what grades? That was like...
There was no ninth graders at Cheyney at the time. There was ninth graders at West or Volney Rogers. So Cheyney had 1,500 students in 3 grades. Sophomore, junior, senior, 1,500 students. And unbelievably, Ursuline and Mooney had more. So
they had West was, they had an elementary school, but the junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade.
Okay. And so you enroll at Cheyney, and you make that move. And so what years did you play?
65, 66, 67 seasons. Graduated in 68.
And so we've talked a lot about Red Angelo's influence on Ron, on a number of players, coaching and mentor-wise. So he was your head coach. Do you have any insight on that or memories from him as your head coach?
Well, the thing I remember about Red, and I've heard Ron say he was like, other than his father, he was a big influence. And that's how he was with me. And then my dad died in 66, when right before my junior season. And Red was an example to look up to for everything. You didn't want to act like a idiot in school. And if you saw him coming down the hall, you respected him enough. It wasn't all fear. Like some people, he had a good presence, don't get me wrong. But you'd be embarrassed to be like a fool in front of him. He had that kind of influence. That's what he had on me. For example, you go to other schools at basketball games. I used to work some basketball games when I was a policeman. I'd go to other schools, and kids with football jackets are acting like idiots at the game. They would never do that at Cheyney. Red was there over there. They were fearful of him.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't. And that's a kind. He was a good example to everybody. You wanted to be like him. You aspired to be like that when you grew up. I guess you were growing up already, but
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about, and I've listened to you and Ron kind of talk about just some of the great players. Even before we were starting recording, you guys are just talking about some of the great players and great games. Who are some of the great players that you remember either growing up or, kind of watching throughout your years?
well, my contact with it was I was probably in 7th and 8th grade, so it was I would say the Joe Lutzy quarterback era when I first come in contact with it, and I think Cheyney was one of the halfbacks at the time, a very good guy, good baseball player too. But Brungard was a sophomore. When he came into the program and started playing, and Lutzy was the quarterback, I think they turned the corner. I think they went 500, like 4-4, 4-4-1, or something like that. And it was exciting. Every game they were in it. When they played like a Mooney or Ursuline, did they have a chance to win this? It wasn't like other years where they were getting blown out. And it was a positive feeling. Things were going in the right direction. And then you put Del Signore, De Niro, the Angelos, and all together. And then within going from when Red, I call it in the movie Grease, the Grease era, where they had good players go out, but then they had about 20 or 30 people who wouldn't go out for sports because they're shining their cars up and stuff like that. Well, that ended sort of, and within 2 or 3 years, there's 100 kids going out for football.
So, all right, let me ask you this: how did Red do that? Because I think, Ron, you've talked about that, right? You took your lumps for 3 years, and even though things were trending in the right direction, by performance wasn't reflecting in the record. How does it go from struggling, not getting guys out, and then all of a sudden, boom, it just takes off?
Well,
for you or for Red or for both?
We never really kind of took off as far as numbers. I mean, our
True.
numbers
True.
actually were up when we first started, but then as we progressed, we kind of locked in around 40 and kind of hovered there. And it certainly wasn't because we were trying to get rid of anybody. We were encouraging, walking the halls, encouraging kids to come out. But, we stuck by, if you can do this, come on out. If you can't, don't. And our kids were our biggest ambassadors. I mean, they'd talk to each other. If you can do this and this and this, and hang, we'd like you to be part of this. But don't waste our time, and we won't waste yours.
Right. What was something that you mentioned? So you had a number of feeder schools going. St. Christine, St. Brendan's. We talked about this on earlier conversations. You have 1,500 kids at Cheyney. The population of Youngstown significantly larger. I'm assuming there's a lot of kids, a lot of neighborhood kids that go to Ursuline and go to Cheyney. What was that kind of like, just on the whole west side? If you guys are both good leading up to the week, the following week, I'm sure you know each other, went to school with each other. That had to be a pretty neat environment when you guys would play each other. What was that like?
Well, it was. I remember when I was younger playing at St. Brennan's, our starting backfield they had Ray Bria and Dick Angle in it. So the two running backs that went against each other in that big football game that I described. But yeah, it was. There was a little pressure that the Catholic school, they wanted you to go to Ursuline, and but our coaches took us to the games and everything, and everybody got excited about Chaney football, and it just took off. everybody wanted to play. Now, there was a couple of my friends that played for Ursuline that when we played, like Joe Dimitovich and Brennan Smatrilla, they had good success there, but it was, it was a rivalry. And Dick Angle he lived on my street and everything, you know. When he played, you want them guys to kill him, you know, him and Willie, his brother. But, it was a heck of a rivalry.
When they got out, Mike, when they got out of this city series, it seemed like they fell off of the schedule. You didn't play them during your tenure, did you?
We did play them my senior year, and I think that was the last time that we played them until maybe Ed played them 3 times in his whole tenure.
Yeah, because we didn't play them my senior year, and we wanted them. We you know, not that you guys didn't, but we wanted them because they had all those guys were on. The only loss that we had my 8th grade year at Holy Name was against St. Columba, and all those guys, Darnell Paul, Solomon Brown, Hanai, they were all on that Ursuline team, and that was a pretty good football team. But they were all lifeguards at Bortz, and we'd come up to Bortz and take over the pool. We really wanted to play. We wanted to play Ursuline bad, but never had that opportunity.
We did play them every year. We played them at West in the freshman football, and we played them all 3 years I was there. Ironically, those are the 2 losses I spoke of with those. In Brungard's junior season, that was the big 6-0 loss. Then the next year, I remember Gary Ferrando intercepted a pass, ran it back, and Brungard's senior season, we beat Ursuline. Then Mike De Niro's senior year, we lost in a very close game. I can't remember the score. It might have been 2 points. And then we lost in a close game. So we didn't – it was like a rivalry, but my squad did play them 4 years in a row. And then after that, Jim O'Malley's and Billy Druszek's season, they didn't play him. And then they didn't play him until Ed was coach, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I forgot about how many Catholic schools, parochial schools, there were, all scattered throughout Youngstown and let alone the west side.
That was an event at Volney and Rock Ridge all Sunday. I mean, every Catholic grade school. I mean, that was a great league.
Yeah. Now, did you guys have your own teams at that time? So each individual school had their own team?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And Holy Name, everybody else came in buses. We came in like a cattle truck or a milk truck. One of the parents had. We couldn't afford a bus, but yeah.
I remember when I was in 7th grade and I was dressed for the game. They're playing St. Christine's across the field. We get done with our lineup, and I looked, and we had over 40 players at St. Brennan's in 7th and 8th grade playing. And I looked across, and I counted, and they had like 40, 45, 50. And that's a Parochial League game on a Sunday afternoon. And then I think 20 years later, when my kids are playing, they merge they only had a couple of teams left. They had to merge like 5 or 6 on one team, and wow, what a difference.
We when I played 7th and 8th grade, it was Northeast Catholic, South Catholic, Southeast Catholic, which would have been Holy Name, and they kind of like. Did Rock play in that league?
Rock played.
Or was he
no,
Poland
he did.
Middle?
He went to Poland schools in 6th grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Michael played for Boardman Catholic. And
okay.
We went to St. Luke's, and they went to school at St. Luke's. And then St. Luke's started tapering off. My son actually stayed there in the 8th grade, Mike, to play basketball because he played all the way through, But Rock, he went to Poland in 6th grade. But it was like every year there'd be less and less kids at St. Luke's. And when it looked like by the time Rock would be in 8th grade, it could be 12 kids or something. So the writing was sort of on the wall. They closed. But they had BCC, St. Charles, St. Luke's, and Holy Family. I think
Yeah.
all were Boardman Catholic.
We were St. Anthony's, St. Ed's, St. Joseph Camel, Hubbard. We had Hubbard. It was so it's just
St.
drastically
Pat's.
different. Yeah, drastically different. Population and whatnot.
Yeah,
going on.
every Catholic church that had a school had a football team. I mean,
Yeah.
St. Stan, St. Matthias, St.
Wow.
Cyril Methodius, Holy Name, St. Brendan, St. Anthony's. I mean, that was a giant league.
Yeah.
St. Anthony's, they had a team. The Montana brothers.
Yeah, we beat them in 8th grade 6-0. Yep.
The referees. Is that the Montana brothers? Is that what
Yeah.
So, you guys, Dobe, you started coaching at Cheyney in what year?
86, Ed Matey's last year as coach.
Okay. So Ed's last year, and then Ron's.
I did 3 years with Ron,
So 87, 88, 89.
and then I went to Poland till 95 season was over.
Okay. So what? Now you were working as a, YPD and then coaching. How did you end up getting hooked up with Ed to start coaching?
I was working the basketball games, security, and I talked to him a couple of times and approached him. I said I was interested in maybe going back to school, getting a teacher's certificate, and like to get into coaching. And then, and I don't remember. Ron will remember who the line coach, whoever it was. He quit, I guess, in the off season, and then he said I could do it, and he was telling me what my duties would be, basically to work them on the sleds real hard, like he used to work us, and so I got hooked up that way. But I don't remember the coach that quit because
I think it was Tom Mager.
Oh, I know Tom. Okay, I didn't know.
And then so that year, Ed resigns. Ron takes over. What were some of the differences, or what did you notice from Ed leaving in '86 to, and we've done already conversation about Ron taking over, and his mindset was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, you wanted to make it as much. You wanted your players to have the same experience, same feeling that Red had, with your own stamp on it. What was kind of the difference there with Ron coming in hungry? Like, what differences did you see between the two?
Well, I'm going to be honest. When Red was our coach, it was Ed's first year coaching as a lineman, and he really worked us and put us through the mill like Red did. And he made us better players, and he was a very hard coach. Now, I coached in '86 when I came back. To be perfectly blunt, the practices were a lot easier than when I remembered when Red was there and he was our line coach. And we went through the season, and Ron took over as head coach, and that's what I saw. I saw a return to the physical conditioning, the importance of it, and everything else. It was a lot harder practices and demand more from the players, and I think it worked. But it took a couple of years to change that culture.
Yeah, it did. And I think with Ed, he achieved a great deal of success, and things kind of got on cruise control. I mean, things were taking care of themselves, and had great staff, and then when that starts to wane, when you start losing a couple guys on staff, and your numbers start drying up a little bit, does a complacency set in? I don't know. I mean, I worked with Ed for 10 years, and were things as intense as playing for Red or playing for Ed when Ed was an assistant? No, they weren't. And you know,
Well, I think, and I think that wasn't a critical question, but there's definitely different personalities involved in it.
Sure.
And to be honest with you, and me having worked for you, not the core principles and core values, but you do have to push different buttons with different kids. When you have a different team that comes in and maybe they're not as gritty as another, you have to figure out what buttons to push and what levers to pull. So, that, and I guess maybe even just a tactical approach. What were some of the differences or what did you feel like Ron coming in? What was your feeling with Ron coming in terms of just how you thought it was going to go, or what your view of what I liked about his program, or what you thought was new and neat or innovative?
Well, I thought that it was going to be like when Red was the coach. That was my impression. And Ron, I was coaching with Ron Ed's last year, and I got to be honest, like we would have an offensive day and we would have a defensive day. And Ed would run the offensive day, and they were good practice. I'm not saying they weren't, but the defensive practices were much harder and more intense. Okay, and I just got the feeling from knowing Ron that he wanted to make it more like when Red was coached, like it was going to be really strict discipline, a lot of hard work, and demand a lot of the players. And I think he proved that he did that. But I was looking forward to that. I wanted to see a little bit harder. I thought the kids could do a lot better. I thought some of the kids might have taken advantage and were a little soft, and it could have been better players.
well, and in speaking to that, I think that you come in and you do want to put your stand. When I came in with the guys that were coaching with me, Mike and Mick and Red and Jeff Gessler, Nicky Winook was helping. The first thing you want to sell is, I'm not Red, and I'm not going to pretend that I am Red, mm-hmm. but you're going to see his influence.
Right.
And I think if you're straight up with the kids and that's how you approach it, and not try to be somebody that you're not, the kids appreciate that honesty. And like I said, I'm not going to say that I didn't try to be Red, because no one can be Red but Red. But I certainly tried to be like him.
Yeah, and it's funny because doing this with you and kind of, okay, for example, I remember when I first started coaching for you, I was like, what is this crab circle? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
What is this crab roll? And I just thought, well, it's just something that was done or whatever. The whole agility process that we would go through coming out and warming up. But talking to you, and you mentioned, well, Bobby Matey came back from Iowa State, talked to Red. We start doing crab circle, and then we're crabbing everywhere, blocking the sled 30 yards downfield. Like, you can see the influence that and the evolution. But I mean, those were, you can see the influence that Red had on not just you but the program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've told you this a number of times. It was important that the kids know who Red was. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
And Ed.
Yeah.
And Chess. I mean, but it was, and they saw his influence to what we were doing.
Yeah, for sure. And at the time, so, Dobe, you're there, 87, and we talked about kind of the struggles there. 88, another struggle. 89, you leave. But one thing that stands out to me about those 3 years was how just utterly heartbreaking some of those games were in 89. Like, so close, so many opportunities, and tough year.
Well, I remember this. We were rebuilding, and I remember Mooney, Fitch, Boardman, first 3 games. Then later on in the schedule, Steubenville, we reinstituted the Ursuline rivalry.
Yeah.
They were put on the schedule. To make things worse, East and South had some excellent teams that made the playoffs. They were pretty good. And we even had to play West Branch, who they had success before that. They were put on the schedule. And then Struthers, they had I'm trying to think of the fellow's name, but he played for the Minnesota Vikings. They had a couple good years.
Jarek, would that have been Jarek?
Yes.
Okay,
Jarek.
John
So,
Jarek, yeah.
I mean, that was a schedule to start with. And then we did have a lot of close games. And, I'm trying to come up with a lineup and get some good linemen. And, and you're playing teams like that every week. And it was tough.
Yeah, I mean, and we were talking a couple times ago. You're facing Hartman and Boren and Dick Angle and Butchie, and your first, second-year coach, veteran coach, but rebuilding. I mean, those are some. You look back at some of the names in the area. A lot of good football coaches that have been here in the Valley.
And Dobe's right. We weren't ducking anybody. We were playing all the big boys, and it wasn't out of design. We didn't, we understood that. Hey, listen, we got to work on this schedule. We got to get this, we got to get some of this in a different direction, so that the kids could, can get some success. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that would snowball. But Red's old adage, respect all opponents, fear none. That's how we went into it. But we were actively campaigning to try to lighten the schedule up, and eventually, it kind of worked its way. But I mean, we got there on the back of playing a tough schedule.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'll tell you, one of the proudest things in those years is when we went to Steubenville, and Ron will go into more detail with their coach Reno, and the fans, and the referees, and those are the proudest. We played really good down there. I mean, we didn't even have field goal kickers when we were having like tryouts before the week, and anybody could make. When if we made a field goal at the end of one of those games, we'd have won. And the other game was very close too, and it was like they're playing in the playoffs. They're state champs one year, and I mean, we gave them all they can handle down there. And he'll tell you about Reno. So.
Yeah, he was a character. There's no question. As a matter of fact, speaking to the referees, a referee down there told me after a call that I challenged, and I was obviously out of bounds. I was in the middle of the field just about, and he told me, as a matter of fact, he said, "See that policeman over there?" He said, "I'll have him handcuff you to the bus if I hear another word out of him."
This is during a game.
This is during the game. This is early in the game. But, and we ended up losing by 3 points in the game. I mean, it was – our kids, they went through a lot, and that's the greatest – I agree with Mike. that's the greatest feeling, knowing. And you remember those kids coming to us, and especially after Steubenville, and saying, "What do we got to do? What do we got to do?" But not, with their dauber down. I mean, they were like, let's get ready and get after next week.
I mean, those were some good Steubenville teams too. They were really good.
Yeah.
And our kids performed right on par with them, and we could have won both games. Something, one or two plays, something happens. Probably one of the 10 holding calls or something they call on us, or clipping. Maybe one of those.
Well, I think the one year, you were either 88 or 89. They were like #1 AP. I mean, it was almost a complete and utter shocker.
And once we get to the doorstep, who do we draw in the first round of the first playoff game that Cheyney ever played? Steubenville.
Right. Right. Again.
Down on the river, right? Playing at East Liverpool.
East Liverpool. Hop, skip, and a jump from Steubenville.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you didn't play them very much after that, right? There wasn't too many times that you came across.
No. And I actually developed a decent rapport with Reno, with film and whatnot, common opponents, and he had a lot of respect for us. Mm-hmm. I certainly have a lot of respect. I mean, the man's still there. I mean,
yeah.
And I think he took over, and I'll go way back. He might have I was going to say he might have taken over from Bill Boren, coached there for 2 years. But shortly after that, I mean, he has to be at least 40 years there.
Well, you're playing in 88, so that's 30-ish, yeah. So if it was early to mid-80s, it's coming up on it. Yeah.
I got a real quick, I went to a coach's clinic, and Reno was talking, and he was talking about the tradition of Steubenville, and he says some kid missed English class, and then he was allowed to go to football practice. So the English teacher was complaining and said, she came, how could this student miss English class and then be allowed to play in the game? And Reno said, if you made English as interesting as I make football, then maybe he'd come to your class.
and I could see Reno when the first time we scouted him down there, and there was a call, and he literally walked out to the hash mark on his knees with his hands folded in prayer, asking the referee to reconsider.
That's an unbelievable run and program and just success, and just a ton of funny stories with, that visitor sideline where you got about 2 yards of 6 feet of you from the fence and the fans and the fire-breathing horse. And
yeah, it's an atmosphere.
It is. And then, so Dobe, when you left in '89, you went to Poland. What was kind of your reason there? Was Mike going into high school? And
yes, my son was, my oldest son was starting over at Poland, and I went over there and coached. And Reed Lamport was the coach for several years, and then Rick Shepis took over for him. So
you guys had a lot of success. And how long were you at Poland?
90 to 95, so 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever play each other during that time? Were you
not
playing
then?
Poland
No,
that
they
time?
played shortly after that.
Yeah, we picked them up shortly after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we played them 7 years. 7 or 8 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Usually it was that Saturday afternoon game.
We look forward to their homecoming.
Yeah, pretty good run against them.
Yeah, we had really good success. Our kids really rose to the occasion and played well there. And I think Julio was there the
Yeah.
entire time. That was his tenure. They evidently got distracted because although the one year that they won it all, that they went 15-0 and won the state championship, they beat us.
I remember that.
They beat us bad. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I used to go to most of those games after I was done coaching, and I remember, I think Brad Smith in one game intercepted 2 different passes and ran them back for touchdowns. I might be mistaken.
Yeah, their state championship was the only year they beat us.
Yeah. They I remember it, and it was just it might have been Brad's maybe sophomore, junior, because his senior year that was a battle. That was a battle. We hit a little tunnel screen to Tondy Smith to get a big first down. I mean, it was back and forth, and I just remember those games being bloodbaths. I mean, physical.
Right. Actually, we were losing at halftime in that game, and our kids really, really responded in the second half.
Yeah.
And, took the game over. Yep.
And I think Julio was there every year except for Brungard. I think we caught him one time, maybe in like 05, 06.
When Beecham was his back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think Brungard was the offensive coordinator.
Oh, okay.
During for their championship season, but I think he was running the offense for a while there for Julio.
Okay. Yeah, those were always some great games, great battles. And I don't know, I guess some final thoughts. You know, you've seen Chaney football probably from the 60s and then followed all the way up through. I mean, when we were in playoff games, you were going down to YSU and watching, I guess. What are your thoughts on the legacy of Chaney football? When you hear that, what does that make you think about, and what's kind of that definition there?
I mean, it goes back to the beginning. You know, I did hear Chess McFee. I actually had him as a teacher at West. He was a gym teacher and stuff, and he would get all the kids in the stands, and this was right around that time when Red didn't have a lot of players. It was just starting to pick up a little bit, and he got everybody, and he talked to them, talked good about Red Angelo and what he was trying to do in Cheyney tradition. And he said, I remember he gave a statement, be wise beyond your years. Don't listen to all these people who are trying to hold you back and everything. And he talked good about Red. He said, Red's a really tough coach. He goes, but he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do anything that he asked you to do that he wouldn't do himself. Mm-hmm. I remember that. And I remember Red coming up. I think he brought Mike Pallow and James Smart up. And he was showing us how to lift weights in the off season.
There's 2 good names from the past.
Yeah.
Mike Powell.
So, and they just got done, and everybody was going crazy because they only lost 1 game, and probably shouldn't have lost that. And these guys over there, they're both all city, and they're showing us how to lift weights and everything, and Red's talking to us, and it was a big deal. And then Ed was an excellent coach. When he coached me with Red, he was excellent, and he had good success. He did really good. I mean, those runs that he had in 74, 75, 76, and then maybe the talent did drop off a little bit, or the interest. Who knows? But I mean, he was an excellent coach. And then Ron was coaching with him, and Ron took over and put his stamp on the program. And I remember going to the state championship game, going to a lot of playoff games. I remember going to a game in Akron where it was cold. They were playing a real good Akron City team that was loaded. And that was a big win. And I remember watching Floyd make a miracle catch in a game.
Walsh Jesuit.
And I mean, I went to all those games, and it's a big part of my life. There's nothing like Chaney football, and the friends that I have that I played with and that I've run into. And I mean, I still meet with those guys maybe once a week. Some of the guys that I played with and stuff like that, so that are still in town. And when somebody a couple of weeks ago, Kenny Mogish passed away, you have feelings for that. Joe Dulick, another kid I played with, was a good guy. He passed away a couple of months ago. And the guys all call each other, talk about it, and we feel bad. You still remember. Or you might not see these people for 20, 30 years, but it's in your blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you about was when you were on kind of like the Hall of Fame committee, right?
Yes.
What was that experience like in terms of, because it's interesting to talk to you, talk to Ron. You guys both are kind of historians of names, and not just we're casual followers. Like, you really invested. How was that experience for you to be able to just go back and research and do some of your homework there?
Well, when I did it, when somebody was in doubt, they bring a name up or something, and I wasn't sure. I actually did this. I went down to the library downtown, and I would get those things that you roll, and I'd look up and I'd roll through them and try to get quotes and about certain players that I wasn't sure of, especially some of these older guys that played in probably after Ron's dad, but between the somewhere in the 30s, 40s. Mm-hmm. In that era. And then there was some that was more recent in the 70s or 80s. Well, some linemen don't get the recognition they do, but they would,
right.
You look through there and there'd be quotes when they have the all-city meeting. One fellow, I'm not going to even mention a name, but some people were in doubt of him, and these coaches said he's one of the best linemen, or the best lineman I've seen, and this and that and everything, and I made copies of make copies, bring them to the meeting, pass it out. So it was important. I took it as important, and I would like to set the standards as high as they could be, but the different people are elected at committee. Sometimes it gets political. There's nothing you could do about it. You vote, and that's how it goes. But I like you to at least make all city, at least probably make all Northeastern Ohio, or have some credentials on your thing, and personalities aside, for football. I'm saying any sport, have a little bit. It should be pretty special to get on that, and you should have to win some awards, well-deserved awards, to get on there.
Ron, you have anything to wrap it up?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, Mike talked about just having the kids in the gym and talking to them. I can remember Red doing the same thing, and I'm sure Mike can remember this too. But he'd talk about the preseason, and I'll always remember this. And he'd say, he said, listen, when you go into training, we'd all be sitting there, the bleachers would be filled. When you go into training, I go into training. He said, you know what? He said, midway through the year, I can't even finish a Coke. He said, I got to put it down. He says, because it's too much. He says, I go into training when you go into training. And he said, and a winner, what's a winner? He says, he says, you see them. He says, they're tan. He said, they got battle scars from contact. He says, and maybe 50 cents in their pocket for a milkshake down at the Isles. He said, that's all. He says, that's what a winner is. But when he talked about chess having, it reminded me of that, and I wanted to mention that at one of the other podcasts. But let me just say this about Mike. It was imperative that Mike join us when we took over. He was a good friend. I mean, he was a senior when I was a sophomore, and when I was a sophomore, I was like most sophomores. I was a bag holder. I mean, that's what we did, or there would be so many kids. Red would say, "Hey, you guys go down the far end of the field and run plays," that's how it was. But when I was a senior, I visited down at Capitol, and Mike was playing down there, and he hosted me, and like I said, we coached as assistants together, and then it was automatic that he'd be part of what we were trying to build there, and testimony to that is, he's my daughter's godfather. He's a good friend, and he was a outstanding coach, it's a pleasure knowing him, and very great. The program was very grateful to have him be a part of it.
Yeah. So hearing all those nice things that you said about him, did he participate in 8th period basketball?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you treat him right during 8th period basketball?
Well, he was always on my team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't very often that we were opponents.
One thing about Ron, when he plays, it's right down the middle. There's no cheating. Believe me.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about 8th period basketball?
Oh, it was a blast. There was a bunch of guys that used to play there. There was some of the younger kids that actually were on a basketball team. There was some that were actually good basketball players that didn't play football. They'd jump in, and they were, a couple of them made all-city. And some of the older basketball players that didn't even play football would come around, and we'd have great games. It was competitive. You just look forward to it. And everybody played hard. It was that was important too. You're playing over there, and you're trying your best to win, and you're playing against a lot of guys that feel the same way that you do and everything. I remember me and Chuck Samaron were the slowest ones then, because he used to be a little, not big Chuck, little Chuck. Little Chuck was about 230 then, or 225. So I was up there in weight too, so that's why I had to guard a lot of times. And we had a blast. We had a good time, and it was great.
The only one I ever heard anyone say something negative about 8th period basketball was my wife. She on Friday she'd say, "Look at this is doing to you." I mean, because I'd come in dragging, after a week. You're in your 50s and you're playing with 18-year-old kids, and it was competitive. I mean, there was.
We were talking about some of the people that would come, and Ron mentioned that somebody from the Browns came, and we couldn't remember that name.
Bob Babbage came one. Well, that was before.
Yeah, no.
That was before you. Jerry Angelo brought Bob Babbage there to play.
The basketball games with when I was in high school, when the guys came back from school, when Mike De Niro and Jerry Angelo, they'd want to play against you. Okay, they'd want to play against the guys that were there now, and that was a bloodbath. I mean, there were a lot of people that got hurt. I mean, because there were no rules in that game.
I think. Now, I'm positive De Niro and Dallas Saunders played in red, and I think it was Jerry. They had 2-on-2 one day. It was just like the most brutal game. It was like, it's at the end of the day or something, when there's everybody sitting in a gym. Maybe a gym class was at the end of a gym class or something. We didn't take gym, but the stands are filled. There are people trying not to laugh. I mean, they're killing each other. I mean, absolutely killing each other. And Red, he was probably 42, 43 years old. The guys were like 20, and he was giving it out. That's and I when they say LeBron takes too many steps, sometimes I think a couple of times Red took too many steps and they didn't call it. But is that right, Ron?
Red made paddleball a contact sport.
Yeah. How about he used to make people go out when he practiced golf in his off period.
Okay.
He made people were going out standing in a football field like this, and he was shooting balls at them and stuff like that. So he used to practice golf a lot, and he worked the whole day he was there. If he had an off period, he'd go run at Rocky Ridge, run the trail, do that. Another one, he would play paddleball. Then he would go outside, hit golf balls. He didn't have an off period, and he stayed there more than 8 hours too. He'd be there for 10 hours, 12. So, yeah, he used to do that exercise with the thing. He had to steer clear of them. They used to run laps around the gym, and he'd have the weights on his back working on these muscles here. And many a time, almost somebody got knocked out. But that was their fault for running so close to him. But
when I was coaching, he came. It was everybody was gone. Coaches we had already met. Kids were gone, and I was just getting out of the shower, and he came in to work out. He was retired and everything.
Yeah.
He said, "Hey Ron, I'm gonna jog the lobby." That's what he did. He went up into the lobby and he jogged the lobby for like an hour.
Just
not the halls, not the track, just the lobby.
Now that he said it, he brought back my memory. When he was coaching the first year, and I never saw this before, but now I know where he got it. The players were running the halls. They were doing all their exercises. And if it snowed, anything, we couldn't go outside, up and down the steps. And there's a routine to run that was when you were there, you did all that stuff in the off season. But yeah, that was the first time I saw it. I didn't see it.
To me, the thing with Ron, I just thought he was so creative and all these ideas. Listening to him talk, and I mean it, not that you're not creative, but I think Red was a real creative, like you said, just off the wall, but had just different ideas, right? Try anything and take chances and
things that are, he was doing things that have evolved into plyometrics and different types of training. I mean, and I've said this a number of times, way ahead of the curve.
Right.
Okay, so and I think that's what any kind of coach wants to do is you grab bits and pieces of other people and kind of mold it into what you do.
Well, I remember Ron, he was talking about plyometrics, and they have to hop up the steps and skip everyone and do whole routine, whole workouts with all this different stuff in it inside the halls of the gym, going up and down the steps, and it was very creative. That's and it did build explosion and everything. Of course, all them guys are going, I got shin splints. And
that surface isn't the best surface to run on.
No, I think it's always good to, hear from just some different perspectives and listen to you guys talk about some of the names that you've mentioned, and I think I would love to be able to see some of the film and some of the past history and players and some of those names that you're talking about. I think that would be really, really special, but
I think one of my buddies, I'm sure he has it, has a film of Mike Dinero playing for Texas A&M. So we'll see if it's a highlight film. So Frank Scrocco has it. So, but
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say one quote from Red before, because you probably have a show with all Red's quotes and everything. But this one, John Raffiti told me he heard it, and I think I remember hearing it. To me, it's real funny. It doesn't really it's not like one of his regular ones, but he was blowing his whistle, and the whistle didn't work. It went, and he turned and looked at Bruce Herdman and said, "Hey, Herdy, a whistle that don't blow ain't worth a damn." I can't stop laughing when I hear that. It's like...
Mike and I were talking earlier, and what's an amazing stat is from his senior year, and that year, and the next year, and the next year, which would have been me as a sophomore. There's over 20 guys that went on to play.
Wow.
I mean, and you're talking about, Louis at North Carolina, O'Malley at Notre Dame, Jeff Romack at Purdue,
Matey and
Tomac at Iowa State, the MAC schools, Druszczak and Seaman, both
Joe
at Bowling
Dulick,
Green.
Yeah.
And
Mogish.
Ken Mogish
State.
at Kent. And then a bunch of us went on to play Division III, smaller school. Mike at Capital, me at Mountain, like Payton, Fedorsen, Brunetti at Irem. Over 20 guys in a 3-year period, with over 10 guys going major college. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Why do you think that was? The talent, the momentum that was gotten because maybe you got one or two guys in and now you got more people coming, the connection, getting to know Red. Was Red super proactive in the recruiting piece at that time?
Yeah, well, I told you that Red would tell you, I'm a, and Dobe similar in size, I'm a 167-pound guard linebacker, okay? And the Macs coming in, Elliot Usiak, and Howard Wires, they're coming in, they're Red's guys. Red's saying, hey, Ron, Elliot's coming in tomorrow from Bowling Green. Wear an extra sweater, stand on your toes, he says, and grip his hand when you shake it. And he thought, and they knew he wasn't going to send him a lemon, but
Right.
he tried to oversell his kids, and he knew that Mount was the best fit for me. And when I made that decision to go there, he was 100% behind it. And but yeah, he established himself as, hey, Red's sitting on some guys, and what he says is gospel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get that one, you give them a good one, or one that they're surprised with how good he is, and all of a sudden they're coming back.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Dobe, thanks. I've enjoyed it, and not only is it good to have you on here as a coach, a former player, but as arguably the best softball pitcher, slow pitch softball pitcher.
I still need 3 more strikeouts to get to 3,000.
I'm sure
I don't know.
somebody's looking.
Nobody wants a 72-year-old slow pitch pitcher anymore. So
We'll have to maybe we'll get a team going just to get you your 3.
maybe I
and
could be like Mr. 3000 or something like.
That's it. Yeah, go play in the Japanese league or something.